Anglers of the internet, welcome back to another Advanced Angler, Kayak Angler podcast. I can't ever get that intro right. It's cooling down, right, guys? I don't know where you're at, but we're in November here in Ohio. Things are cooling off, and it's beginning to become time for techniques that call for cold weather techniques, basically, to catch the fish. And one of them that's kind of a mystery to a lot of people is the float and fly. And tonight we got two great guests to break down the float and fly for us. Let's go ahead and jump into the topic. We got Matt Fraizer and Tyler Boyet. Is that how you say your last name?
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, it's
Boyet.
Okay. You can go French and say Boyet, but I ain't. Well, I guess I am, but I don't know how to speak it.
The float and fly, a lot of people seem to have heard of it. But very few people actually fish it. You know what I'm saying?
So go ahead. So like down here in the Ozark region, like Beaver Lake, Bull Shoals, Table Rock, Lake of the Ozarks, it's been a very sneaky technique. And a lot of guys won a lot of money over it over the years, but then it kind of went away, but people still fished it a lot. But I'm not going to get into the topic of live scope by any means. But once you see the fish with the live scope, the slower presentations kind of just go out the window, and you're going to go chase them down with a jerk bait. You know, they made all that popular, but really, a lot of people don't want to spend the time to understand it, learn it, and fish it. It's a very, I wouldn't say difficult technique. It's one that takes a lot of patience, and you have to understand the bait and understand the presentation, and have the confidence in it, or you're not going to do it. Some guys got word of it and wanted to start, using it. They went, bought some stuff, maybe watched a YouTube video, maybe not, listen to the doc talk. They went out for 2 hours and they said, this is for the birds. I'm done with this. Picked up a moving bait and went on with their day. But yeah, I mean, I still throw it a lot. I haven't in like the last year or two, but man, that was my favorite technique when it got really cold. And we're talking, like today in the Missouri, it was high of 40 today, and it almost, it was perfect day to talk about float and fly. It's one of those perfect things. It's one of those baits that you have to understand it, you have to learn it, and if you don't want to put the time in learning it, then you would never be successul at it, and you're never not going to understand it to even want to throw it. But it is a dynamite. And you're thinking about a little fly. I don't know if this can pick it up. Just this little guy right here.
So when they say flies, most people listen to this, by the way, Tyler. So okay. Tyler's holding up a very small. What's the weight on that?
This is a tungsten head. So this is like, I want to say it's what is this? It's 1/16
so
to it's like a 1/16 ounce.
It's like a small bucktail.
Yeah, just a small bucktail. It's like so we're more of a talk. It's more like a larger, like your 1/8 ounce flies, all the way down to your 32nd flies with a longer. I like mine to have a longer tail, more movement. So you wanted like a bucktail. I like duck feathers and some other stuff. It just depends on the water clarity and how really cold it is. And it's more of a. That's what people have to don't understand is, it's do nothing, let it sit, do nothing, don't touch your rod tip. And a lot of occasions, I can only talk for like the Ozark regions, the out west it's a big thing out west. Clear Lake and all that stuff, and they were using like when they did it, they used a fixed bobber. See, I use a slip float, so there's two different ways I can
Okay,
only
okay. Let's
speak
not get
about.
just yet. Let's not get into that just
Okay.
yet. Let's give Matt a chance to talk
Yeah,
about
yeah.
how
Go
it
ahead.
is out west, because Matt's from out west. You're
Okay.
from the Ozarks, so we're
Yeah.
kind of going to get some, two different perspectives.
Oh yeah, and it's gonna be two
Yeah,
different ways, I'm sure.
yeah. This is definitely interesting to me. I'm listening, taking some notes too. But I've been doing this. So in California, give you a little background of California. California, obviously a giant state. Northern California could do something entirely different than Southern California. Um, Northern California, there's Lake Shasta is a big lake that people might have heard of. In that region, there might be 150 boat filled on the lake. 150 boats out of 150 boats are going to have multiple float and fly rods and setups and depths on their deck every tournament. Um, Kind of going back to what you're saying, there's probably 3 or 4 guys out in the field that always dominate. Everybody's throwing the same bait. Everybody's throwing the same, trying to throw the same rig, trying to work it the same way, trying to fish the same areas. But the same 3 or 4 guys are always dominating the field. So that goes to show the learning curve a little bit. I personally, I consider the guy that I learned float and fly from almost 9 years ago, probably one of the best in the world at it. Definitely the best in California. Um, and there's a lot that goes into it. So we have deep, clear water reservoirs here. Everything we have here, we don't have shallow lakes. Our lakes are 150 foot, 180 foot. Crystal clear most of the winter. We don't have a lot of wind here, which is really nice for the float and fly. We have a lot of big spotted bass in California. I think we have the world records here, and a lot of the. I mean,
Yeah.
I have a lot of spots between 6 and 9 pounds myself,
Man.
and
Jeez.
they're
We just don't
and a
see
lot
that
of them
big.
come on the float and fly. So what I always tell people, this technique's near and dear to my heart because I even had St. Croix help me design a rod just for California float and fly. So
Nice.
what I see out here is mainly so what I throw. I know you said most listeners are just listeners and not.
You can show it.
Not,
We'll describe it.
Okay, well, just quick. There's a. So I use the Pro Series. It's the Pro Series fill
Yeah.
float because that one has a metal grommet at the top of the float. It allows the lighter baits to sink a lot easier. So the float is a big deal in the whole presentation. And what I got when I'm here in the Ozarks and Missouri, you're letting the thing sit. We're just the opposite. We never let it sit. So
Okay.
we're literally taking the rod and just stop, stop, and then it either lays down, lays sideways, goes halfway under, or just completely disappears. So, and it's in every 3 to 4 cast fish on in California. So
Yeah.
it's not a patience game here at all. It's about the speed of going down the bank and fishing a popper.
Wow.
So
Yeah, so that's a lot different than what I've seen and what I've been around down here.
yeah,
It's a whole different game, down here.
and you
Um,
guys get a little bit colder.
yeah.
My lakes when we get into what I've seen when we get 55 to 58 degree water temp, that bite starts kicking on, but it's a lot of the smaller fish. Once we get down to 52 degrees and below, which we only get between like 48 and 52, that's about as cold as our water gets.
Okay.
But as soon as we hit 52 degrees, the big ones start showing up. So what we're normally seeing is the big fish are feeding on the bank all the way until we hit about 55 degrees, and then they start pulling out on the shad that are dying off and just roaming the middle of the lake, and then that's what kind of starts that trend where you always hear about the guys in tournaments that you got a guy in a tournament that has 4 little runt fish and then 1 giant 8.5 pounder in our lakes, and that 8.5 pounder almost always comes off somebody throwing a Cinco off the back of the boat, and it's a free fall bait, and you're catching that big suspended fish.
Right.
Well, the float and fly, we set it our dropper. So we use slip bobbers. Our dropper is is anywhere from 8 to 12 feet. We never go deeper than 12 foot on a float and fly. So we're catching those fish that are way out off the bank and just sitting there. And you're targeting those large fish that people are catching on that Cinco by accident. We're targeting those fish all day. Our bait's always in that fish's face. So California's known for big ones. We got a lot of big ones, and we do catch. I mean, you can catch 18 to 22 pounds on a float and fly here. And I've made a pretty good living on the fishing side over the last 8 years on float and fly, because I live in the central part of the state, which hasn't adopted that technique very much, and going down into the southern part of the state even less, because that water doesn't get near as cold. But anyway, needless to say, there's a lot of people kind of in that mid stage in the middle California where they really want to throw the fly because they hear about how good it is in the northern lakes, and they don't know the setup. So leading into all that, the reason why I'm kind of setting you up on that whole story is what I've found is not only is it a technique and kind of an art to what you do, but you really, really, really have to have the right setup. If you don't have the right line size, the right fly size versus the float you're throwing versus the reel you're throwing, the length of the rod.
Okay. Slow down. We're gonna get into all those specifics right here. You're jumping ahead on me a little bit, but I love it, man, because you're absolutely right. One of the things about the float and fly, especially with the slip bobber, is that if you don't have everything dialed in, one of those, it's the old adage, the weakest link of the chain is going to be the first one that breaks. So it's whatever your weak link is going to mess up the whole system.
Right. Yeah. Yes. With the slip bobber, the balance is key. The size of the slip bobber to the size of the fly you're using, line size, is very key to how that bobber sits in the water. Because see, like you.
Well, let's describe this real quick. Let's describe the float and fly for everybody real quick.
Okay.
I don't think I did a good enough job in the beginning of that. So go ahead, Tyler.
I was going to say, I'm slip bobber. There's two ways. You can do a fixed bobber, which is, it's fixed to your line.
With like a three-way swivel or something.
No, it's actually like man, like the bluegill fishing and crappie fishing, how I grew up, you got the spring-loaded weighted bobber that has like a little tiny little hook on it, and you hook it on your line type of deal. Mm-hmm. That's like what I consider the fixed bobber. Like a lot of people throw like the fixed bobber, that you push a button and you wrap the line around that little hook, like you're bluegill fishing or whatever, just bank fishing, bobber fishing, really. Yeah. That's a fixed system, but you got to have a long rod, and you got to have, it's just a real pain in the butt to throw. So like forgive me if I'm wrong, but how I was told, that's how it started in the West Coast, is with the fixed bobber system. And then there's some guys has modified it through then to use like the crappie slip floats, is what, basically what it is, just a slip bobber. And it was, some people make it really complicated, and some people just, there's two ways. I mean, you can catch fish not making it complicated, and you can catch fish making it complicated. But like, just to dumb it down, it's just basically a crappie float. If you're, in the Midwest, you crappie fish. It's a crappie. I'm sure they crappie fish out in the West Coast too.
Like a slip bobber, right?
Slip bobber, and I use the thread stop, because like he was saying, he fishes 6 to 12. Down here in like Bull Shoals, where we got 100 foot of water, we'll catch them in 25 to 30 feet on the slip bobber.
Are you putting that under the bobber?
Yeah. So we were on the slip. Yeah. So I'll mark out, kind of where it's at, and I'll take a permanent marker, which really doesn't last that long. But if I know the fish are suspended in 20 feet, I put a mark on my line where my slip bobber stopper should be in my reel, and I kind of keep it kind of where it's at, and I adjust on the fly. But I'll be setting it, so that fly would, when it sits there, it would be, 15, 20 foot in depth.
Yep, we lost him.
Yeah, we lost him. So
yeah, I can take over for you there.
Yeah.
So the slip bobber, the way I throw it So I always tell everybody mine's real easy because I don't falter from my fly. The only thing I change is fly color. I use the Spro Fat Fly. It's an 1/8 ounce, and I throw it on a Pro Series fill large size float. So when you look up the float, it's either going to say large or it's going to say 3/4 inch on the float. That float is a big deal because if you go the extra large or you go the medium's too small and your fly starts to sink your float. And then when you get into extra large, you're not seeing a lot of bites because it's too buoyant and it's floating too much with your light bait. So what I do, I run a 3000 reel because it has quicker line pickup. I run 15-pound braid to a 6-pound fluoro leader. So when I put my leader on it, the way we're fishing out here, like I said, 6 to 12 foot, I put about 20 foot of 6-pound fluoro leader on 15 attached to 15-pound braid. What that does for you is the fluoro allows your fly to sink, and the braid keeps your line floating on the water, allowing your light flies to go. You got to imagine your line goes out to your bobber at a 90-degree angle and drops. So you have to have that floating line so you don't have that lag in your line, so it allows your light flies to sink. Otherwise, you're going to be fighting your bobber standing up all day, and if there's any wind at all, you're going to be really having it tough trying to get your float's just going to float with the water and not allow your fly to sink. So what it is once you do your braid leader to your 6-pound fluoro at the bottom of at that point, you're going to put a bobber stop up your line. Phil makes bobber stops also. They already have pre-line tied a little tube that has a knot pre-tied for you. You put your line through the tube, you slide it up to the depth you want to be. For me, being that's around 12 foot, I'm always about 4 feet longer than the tip of my rod, so it's really easy to figure out. So you just pull it up, you tie it off, you cut your tag ends off, you slide that tube off your line, and then the next thing you put on is a little red bead that comes with your pack. That line tie you want to be very, very thin in diameter. You do not want a heavy like rope style line tie, or you're going to have a disaster casting all day. So you want it to be able to go through your guides easy and reel into your reel easy. So the smaller diameter line tie for that bobber stop you can do, the better. Then you go red bead. That red bead allows your knot not to slip through your float. So your red bead's between your bobber stop, your line tie you just did, and then the next thing that goes on is your float. So now your bead's going to be sitting on top of your float. And then at the bottom of your line, you tie on your 1/8 ounce fly. That's that Spro Fat Fly that I throw. I throw that fly specifically because I've taken custom flies. A lot of guys have made me flies, a lot of different things I've tried over the last 8 years. The main difference about a Spro fly is it's actually a little lighter than 1/8 ounce. And that fly sits parallel in the water absolutely perfectly. That butt end of that hook does not sag on a Spro Fat Fly. If you look at a lot of custom flies and people that bring them up and want to send them to you, they sit a little different in the water and your bites go down tenfold. So that's a big giant key part is you want a fly that's parallel in the water because that's natural looking bait, especially Absolutely. When they're getting that good of a look at it, because it's just for the most part sitting in their face, they're getting to stare at it in pretty clear water in my neck of the woods. You have to be on target with that fly. So then that fly is just tied on to the bottom of your line. And then what's going to happen is your bobber is going to slide down and rest on the top of your fly that's at the bottom of your line. So it's very easy to cast because it's all one unit. You're casting it. You can cast it 20, 30 foot. You don't really need to because you're really targeting fish, 10, 15 foot off the edge of your boat. You're long cast, it's harder to see your bites, harder to see your bobber, not as effective. So that's the way I do it. One thing I can tell you, I'll give you a huge learning curve on this one. If you use a Pro Series float and fly or any float that has a plastic butt end of it where the tube and the bottom of the float is plastic, so the top has a metal grommet on it, that never fails. But the bottom piece is plastic. So if you take that bottom piece and you cut, instead of having just picture a round hole on the bottom of that deal, well, what happens over time is the eye of your fly, every time you're casting, you're putting pressure on the eye of your fly, and that round circle is going over the eye of your fly, and it's warping the bottom of that, and eventually your fly's going to start sticking to your bobber, not dropping in the water, and it's frustrating. So what you do is you take a pair of scissors before you put your float on your line and cut it up at like a 45-degree angle. So you're going to look like you almost have a hook point at the end of the bottom of your bobber. You're just going to cut it up at an angle. Once you cut it up at that oval angle, it'll never stick to your bait again, and you'll never deal with that problem, and you'll have a free floating fly all day. And that's a really frustrating thing for somebody learning float and fly, because they do not understand why it's not dropping, and the float's standing up the second it hits the waters because your fly's stuck to the bottom of it.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is if you're a tournament angler, don't cheap out on a $7 bobber. You need the ones with the brass harness. Don't get the cheap ones for this technique with the plastic. That's like the biggest. Don't cheap out on yourself on that, because it's going to hurt you more in the long run. Buy the ones like he was talking about, the fill. I use those Pro Series also. You got to have the brass, on top and the bottom of the bobber. So you're
never gonna lose a bobber. Bobbers, even if you break your line, your bobber's coming back.
Spend the money, people. We got hundreds of dollars of rods and reels and all that stuff. Spend the money, the couple extra bucks compared to when they're on the shelf. One's $2.99 for a pack of one or two, and the other one's $6.99 for one. Yes, you need the $6.99 one, whatever it is. You need that one with the brass harness, not the plastic, because like he was saying, it would do more harm than good, and it's just going to be more frustration. So like yes, exactly. So when I throw the float and fly, that technique is really good for us. I mean, we got water. I say like Bull Shoals, to give you an example. You can see the bottom in 22 foot, right? You can see, usually when we say the Bull Shoals is dirty, we're talking like you can't see under 8 foot. That's dirty for those boys down there. That's
which is clear, right? I mean, 8 foot visibility is pretty clear for most people.
Yeah. So
and the fly will work in that visibility too. As long as you can see about 1.5 to 2 foot, the fly will
absolutely.
Still work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
You don't need like crystal clear water. I mean, the more clear the water is, the best it's gonna do. But like, man, so like, not jumping the gun, but like, so many people, when they're not they're not understanding the float and fly. I can tell you here's a secret that not a secret, but here's like a little thing to do. So I don't know how you guys are in other states and stuff like that, but in the Ozark regions, we have trout parks, we have trout streams, right? So we're going to dumb down. How I got taught is dumbing your tackle down, dumb it all down to trout, and basically take a trout float and a trout fly, and basically you're kind of doing the same thing, just understanding your patience, and just understanding you're just breaking it down to like a smaller scale, and you're seeing the fish react to it. And what helps a lot of people is when you're using that kind of bobber, the smaller floats. So like a lot of times people miss bites because they're waiting for the bobber to bob, or they're waiting for the bobber to just go under. Well, a lot of times when it's really cold for us and it's a really cold bite, that bobber would just, if you got it balanced correctly, that bobber would just come up and just.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about that. So a lot of people probably don't understand. You want the bobber when it's in the water. These are like torpedo-shaped bobbers, and it's a line through bobber. You don't want it up and down. You want it laying on its side.
No. You want it up and down, but you want it balanced enough. Matt, you can jump in too. You want it balanced enough so like let's just say the throw bobber. Let's just say the bottom half is brown and the top is red, right?
Right.
That little, you just want, to me, what I got taught is you want that fly and the bobber to be balanced right where the two colors break.
Okay.
So when you barely you can see, so the let's just say the bright red color is an indicator. When you see it bob, that's a fish, right? It's in its mouth. Fish don't have hands. Set the hook. Or there's when it goes, all the way under. Absolutely. So
Yeah.
what the thing is with the slip bobber with being balanced is, so that bobber's sitting like this, right? And that fish will come up and eat that fly. Well, if it takes tension on that off that line, or it takes tension off of the bobber, that bobber's not going to go down. It's going to go like this and sit
And then
horizontal.
I got
So
you.
that bass comes up, ate it, didn't go left, didn't go right, didn't go down. It just came up, put it in its mouth, and just sat there with
Hanging on to
just
it.
hanging on to it. And then that bobber just sit up on its side because it doesn't have the pressure underneath it of the weight of the jig, the fly. So it kind of releases back up and sits like that. And then all of a sudden it'll go right back down like this. If and that fish just spit it out, and you're done. It's over with.
Yeah.
So like that's a lot of the sneaky key bites, or when that bobber. That's why it's so precise to having the right size weight to the right size cork, and have it in balance just right. So those bites, when they don't hit it hard, or we're talking real cold, or it doesn't even have to be cold. It can be summertime. I like it in the summertime too. And then they're just in a funk. They're a big storm, big pressure change. They're just sitting suspended, and they're not wanting anything. But that fly just sits right in front of their eyes, and just sits there and just sits there and just sits there, and they just go. And then that cork just goes up and it sits horizontal on top of the water.
So I'm gonna jump in before you go on, because I want to say something what you just said, which is a good point. When you're looking at good way to judge your depths on where the fish are and how they're eating your float too. So what he's saying about the bobber laying over on its side and the fish coming up with it. So what that is when the fish, say you're fishing 12 foot, I'm just giving you my numbers, but say you're fishing 12 foot, and now every bite you're getting that day, your bobber's laying sideways, which is not a bad bite because they usually have it and hold on to it when they do that. But what it means is your fly is a little below the fish. So they're going down to get it and coming back up to where they were used to sitting. So they're going to get that layover bite. Now, if you adjust your depth and say they were in 10 foot and you're in 12, you adjust yourself to 8 foot, your bobber is no longer going to lay over. Those same fish you're going to catch, but your bobber is going to either bob or it's going to go under. It's not going to lay over because they're going to want to come up and eat it and go back to where they were sitting.
Oh, see, I just learned something there too. I just thought they just bit it differently, but
so that's what they're doing. So that's why those layover bites, they're good bites, because you got to and one thing you got to know about float and fly fishing is it's not like a bobber and a worm. They're not eating it and holding on to it. It's quick. That's why it's so imperative that if you fish a 3000 series reel and a long, I use a 710 medium light extra fast rod by St. Croix.
okay.
All it does, both those two items together, the reel picks up line quicker, and then when you're reeling above your head, you don't set the hook. It's not even a sweeping hook set, because you got to remember you're using a little wire hook that flexes. All you got to do is reel set into the fish. But when you have a longer rod and you lift your hand slowly above your head and you have that 3000 size reel, you're picking up line two times as fast, and you're getting into the fish, because those fish, it's a slow bite. They're not coming up aggressive and eating that thing. They're coming up, they're getting a real good feel of it in their mouth. And once they find out it's not real, they're trying to get rid of it. So you got to be on your game. As to what he was saying, the best way to describe a bobber bite when the bobber's sitting vertical like that is anything you don't do to that bobber is a bite. Anything that you don't do with your line, and you move that bobber, I don't care if it goes up, down, sideways, if it sits a quarter of an inch deeper in the water, whatever it may be, that is absolutely a fish, and you got to go as soon as you see it. Otherwise, it's too late.
There's no like Texas rig 10-inch worm letting it eat. No, you're already there's nothing like that. So like he was saying 710, I use a 7.6 medium light. I just can't, except for glide baits, I can't throw a big rod, or I hate larger rods, right? Um, so like I use he's St. Corey's got a good one, like you said. I use a Dobbins one. It's a 7.6 medium light. But the 3,000 reel is the key. 2,500, 3,000. You can't go down deep. You need that to pick up the line like quickly. Rare.
You want a high speed reel if at all possible, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's exactly, yeah, exactly. So you want
Yeah,
to,
that bigger spool helps your every half crank of your reel picks up a lot more line than even a fast reel. You just want that big spool.
yeah, and the big spool to me actually keeps for the bobber stop for getting hung up in the line like so small. It kind of like doesn't get. I mean, it kind of stays where you
Yes.
put it. That's the
Yes.
biggest thing. You don't have to. The more time you're fishing and less time you're messing with your bait, messing with your bobbers, messing with everything. The better chances you're going to catch fish, and the more less aggravated you're going to be.
Yep. Did we lose him again?
I think so. So I mean, there's obviously a lot of people listen to this podcast or tournament
No,
anglers.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
I got
Well, you're okay. You're okay, man. Go ahead.
27,000 scam calls a day. I shit you not. I get 40 a day. I got a new not a new number, but a new phone. And AT&T scammed me into getting a dual SIM because it'd be cheaper on my plan. And so I have two SIM cards. One's for data and one's for my personal number, since I had it for 15 years. And ever since I got that data freaking new phone number, I get Medicare because it was an old lady's name named Barbara, and they call me about Medicare every day. It's so annoying. I don't know how to get it stopped. I literally, every time I've jumped off here is because I had 10 people calling me, and I just try to delete it. But going back to reality is, back to the bite, or back to float and fly, is the you don't cheap out again on buying a smaller reel. It's not like you got to go spend $1,000 for this setup, right? It's nothing like that. You got to have a 20 minimum 25. If that's the worst case scenario, if you have one laying in your basement and you just want to try it, that I would just get a good 30 or 3,000 size reel, 7.6 to 7.10, in that range of medium light. It's really not a, I mean, I guess you can get away with a medium. I'm not sure, but you got to understand, like, it's a thin little wire. The
Yes.
Spro flat fly is one of the best baits. Like he said, it's more of that fly sitting horizontal, sitting as natural as can be. Um, at no present, like no action, like for me, no action given it to that. It's just sitting there, and just every once in a while I'll pop it, or just move it a little bit. But like, I'm using it when it's really really cold. That's when I turn
Yeah.
on to the float and fly.
I
Or
I'd be really interested to hear from you now that you've heard what we do in California. I'd be really
yeah,
interested to hear if you did and stop and kind of flare your rod tip and make your bobber kind of
so
bounce.
I do that. Here's, I'm gonna give up the sneak, right? I'm gonna give up a little bit of a sneak. So when they get in the Ozark regions, and I haven't done it a lot lately, and I should, because I was really good at it, the float and fly. But ever since Live Scope, like I said, came out, my fishing been different, right? When they get in this spawn funk, right? Those bucks are up there, but the females are not wanting to eat anymore. But they're there, they're suspended, or there's a front that just came in. When they
Push them
start
off.
on their beds, there's there is a part of time when those females, they just shut down. They don't want to eat anything, right? Like a week or two before they get locked on the bed, or they're kind of like coming in the bed, checking it out, and then like coming back out to deep water and just sitting suspended out back from the bed, or the bed, if there was a pressure change, a cold front, any kind of whatever's going on. The lake dropped, stuff like that. Those big females sit out there and just like suspend, right? So that's when if I throw the floating fly shallower, that like 2 to 6 foot depth range, sitting there, and that's when I would shake it just a little bit because I know they're pulled off the bank, and I'll just sit there and then I'll just annoy them, right? Just sit there and just let it sit there, and then I'll shake it a little bit and let it sit there, and shake it a little bit and let it sit there, and that's try to get those suspended females that don't want to bite a reaction. That's when I shake the rod tip. I guess do it the West Coast style.
Yeah.
Shake the rod tip and move it a little bit. Now you're gonna catch in that springtime. You're gonna catch crappie on it, right? It's gonna
Right.
you're gonna get annoyed about it. You're gonna catch some crappie on it. But then again, man, I've even on deeper beds because some of the Ozark lakes, they don't spawn in 2 foot, 3 foot of water like the smallmouth down here. They'll be on the bluff ends or bluff shelves, and they're sitting in 8 to 10 foot, right? And then you got so many people that flip a white or a pink, whatever their bed bait choice is. They're flipping on the bed and stuff like that. Man, you put that floating fly right above their head and let it sit there on their bed and let it sit there and do a little shaky
Yeah.
shake.
So tell me this too. So one huge positive to your floating fly is they're always hooked right in the dead center or the top of the head, and you do not lose fish once you hook them. The only way you're losing a fish on a floating fly, because that fly's so light, is if you horse them. You either flex the hook because you got too stiff of a rod and too tight a drag. If you let your drag wide open and you have light line, you are not going to lose fish in that technique. That it just doesn't happen.
Right. Yeah. And I think now since the whole scoping and minnow scoping deal, and everyone's making a scoping rod and the whole scoping deal is going on, I think there's a lot more availability of a lot more people putting a spinning rod in their hand. Because I don't know one person. I don't even think you can I don't even care about the BFS using a bait casting setup for this floating fly. I don't think it's possible, just in my
Yeah,
opinion.
I
I
don't
really
think it's
don't
even.
think
I
so.
don't. It's
Well,
yeah. I don't think it's the right
even
fit.
it, even if it was possible, why?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a lightweight setup. It's going to be
It's a
easier to cast. It's going to be easier to cast multiple times and keep it rigged up the right way on a spinning
Right.
reel.
Yeah.
It's
I
just
mean,
like
you
why
definitely want to
even.
have a couple rods rigged up, different. It's not a, I mean, I would minimum have 2 setups, right? Minimum of different depth chains and stuff like that. And see, now we can call, I hate bringing this up, but the old live scope, it kind of makes a little bit either to see where they're setting up at now. It's not
oh
taken
yeah.
out of like it's and now the pressure of those fish, the floating fly is gonna be a pretty good presentation coming up now of all the suspended pressure fish, right?
Yeah.
Because like when I went and floating fly before live scope, let's just say you can't afford live scope, right? You don't have to have live scope to do it. You just have to set up where these fish, let's say wintertime. So like me, I'm looking at bluff walls, bluff shelves, right? That there might be a shelf in 8 foot. There's a shelf, and then it drops off to 30. So there's something that they suspend off of. They come up to the shelf and eat, and they're just suspended off of bluff walls. Let's just take a bluff wall, the hard example, and that's where you look for your creek channel swings, um, where they set up in the wintertime, and they suspend around that type of area. That's where you want to go look at, and that's where you want to go throw the floating fly. You have to throw it in areas that there's going to be fish, right? If you don't have live scope. So that's why I was saying earlier about trout fishing, just getting to understand the confidence, right? So like, here's me, like, not to get off subject, before I go bed fishing, really, I'll go trout fishing because there's 100 trout standing there and staring at your lure, and you understand patience. You get that
Yeah.
patience down. You get you get that off of you of rushing, right? Because that's a lot of times of our fishermen, especially in tournament anglers, you're rushing because if you don't have, let's just say you have it's 11 o'clock and you only got one in the box. right? And you weighing it at 3. Now you're rushing, right? So like, you don't need any more of anything that's going to make you rush even more on these type of presentations. So that's why I go trout fishing. If you can go trout fish, I mean, you can do it. You can learn it on a school of crappie, right? You can take the same setup as you're going to do on your bass, to same cork, same fly, same everything. Go pull up on a school of crappie that's 100 of them, 50 of them. If you got 360, 2D, there's a school of crappie suspended in 10 foot of water, 12 foot of water. To go throw it out there and learn it, learn the patience, learn the bites.
See how the bobber goes up and
See how the
down. See
bobber
how it
bobber
lays
goes down.
over.
You don't have to, because right, the bass, which I've never came across a school of 100 bass, school of 50 bass, right? Unless they're like little tiny ones. So like pulling up to a school of crappie that there's 100 there, you're probably gonna get a bite or two.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
probably gonna catch one or two, and just doing that, just giving confidence in that lure, just in that presentation. And then another thing is, when you go out and do it, you take everything out of the boat, so you don't even, like, you know what? I bet I can catch them on a jerkbait right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't even
It's
take
just
everything out of the boat.
yeah, just like anything else. Like if you
Yeah.
West Coast is always known for swim bait fishermen. That's the deal out here. Well, a swim bait fisherman's only as good as the guy that's willing to throw it all day and die by the sword. And float and fly is no different. If you're a guy that picks up a float and fly because the situation, hey, what's right in front of me looks like a float and fly spot, let me try that real quick. Very little success. Pull it in, and then you're only using it and putting it out there, maybe 20, 25 casts a day. Well,
Right.
that's not the way. If you're going to, float and fly is a technique you lean on and you die with, because it will on us. So a couple things, 2 or 3 things I'll hit on that has saved me. So first of all, the float and fly is number 1 fish is a spotted bass. Second would
Yeah.
be smallmouth to a degree, but weight I cut in half. Like the bite's cut in half. Like if you're in a spotted bass fishery, you're gonna have fun all day. I don't care if everybody goes out there, they're having a hard time catching 4 to 6 fish all day in a tournament. We're catching 60 to 80 fish on a fly. I mean, it's a whole different world out here when you're talking spotted bass. So when we get into smallmouth fisheries, bites go way down, not near as often. And then on the heavier side, so I've targeted 8.5, 9 pound, 10 pound largemouth on this little bitty fly, and I've had days where I've caught multiple fish over 8 pounds in California on a fly in the middle of summer. But you got to, just like a swim bait in that scenario, you've got to be willing to go out there and get 1 to 3 bites all day. You're targeting a giant fish, and they're not fish that typically eat a fly. But if you're that's a scenario where I do not shake the bait. That is a dead sticking deal when you're fishing largemouth. And the other 2 things, I'll give you 2 real quick learning curves that if you want immediate success, number 1 thing you target, and this is a huge what you call it earlier, a sneak. this is a very huge learning curve. So anything man-made and vertical, there's fish on it, and I can guarantee, I don't care what part of the country you're in, if you put that thing at 12 feet, I don't care where you're at, you will get bites and you will gain confidence. If you're on bridge pylons, you want your float touching the concrete. You want to get it at an angle to where you're parallel with the edge of the pylon, and you cast up on it. Your bobber's literally hitting concrete, and you're shaking it or sitting it still, however it is in your region. You're going to get killer bites there. And, dams are awesome. Any man-made structure that has concrete, absolutely killer. Steep bluff walls are always killer. But the other sleeper is, a lot of people stay away from Main Lake, and they don't do the long slope. They don't. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Okay. So the long, slow tapering points in a lake, where you might start out at 1 foot and then 200 yards out off the bank, you're still only in 15 foot. you have to visualize, if you've got your slip bobber and you have it set up for 12 to 15 foot, you got to visualize where the bottom is. So if you look at your fish finders and stuff, hey, look, we're still out here in 15 foot and your thing's set at 12, you're golden. But if you're sitting out in 15 foot and you're set at 15 foot and you're borderline on the ground, you're defeating the purpose of a suspended fish. You need to move out deeper along that long, slow, drawn out point and get yourself to where your baits at least starts 3 to 4 foot off the bottom, and you work it out to where you're about 10 foot off the bottom, and then repeat. But those way drawn out fish suspended out really slow tapering banks are a really large portion of the fish that people do not catch, do not target, and aren't able to catch. And that fly is an absolute killer in that scenario. They're fish that aren't bothered, and you're right in their face, and they're on every one of those points in your main legs. And you just got to be willing to. You might be 200 yards off the bank, but you're suspended over 20 foot, but you're sitting in 12 to 15 foot, and those fish are sitting right where you're sitting. So anyway, those are the two things I would target. If you're a new guy and you want some confidence, get to some vertical man-made structure, and there's always fish stuck to that stuff, and they're always waiting to pin something up against those walls, and a fly is no different.
Yeah, exactly. Just like the big swim bait game, you're looking at your ambush points, right? If you're 2 foot, 3 foot away from, the bank, your chances of, like on the swim bait, is down, right? You watch all the big time swim bait guys, and they're make sure their positioning is right where they want to be with that big glide bait cast, right? If you watch all the YouTube videos of all the guys, like Big Bass Dreams and all the Oliver Nye and all that stuff, man, he's making sure that his boat is positioned so he's at the ambush point of when he gets bit, it's right at the wall of that ambush point, right? Those big fish, they don't want to move, right? They want to have a less energy taking that big bait or big, opportunity than chasing it down. So when they see that right ambush point, that's when you get bit. But I think a lot of people, like going back with the floating fly, I think a lot of people just don't understand. It's technical, but it's not like rocket science, right? If you look at different people's views on it, people like, I just don't have time for it. And in the wintertime, it's a very patient deal with us because our water temperature, let's just say 38, 37, it's that time when they're just sit there shut down, suspended, and there's nothing or reaction bite happening. That's when I just literally sit there like the old school Ned rig. If you think it's sitting there long enough, let it sit longer, right? Keep on letting it sit. And you think it's enough, you got to move it, let it sit there even longer. But you can't just let it sit there in the middle of a bowl, right? Like in the middle of nowhere. You got to be somewhere there's a piece of structure, where there's bait fish around, there's activity around, the fish are sitting there suspended. You got to find the fish. It's not like magic. You throw a floating fly down every bank, you're going to go catch a fish. It's not. You got to be in the right areas, and then they got to be in the right moods. Not really in the right moods. If they're in the feeding, they're going to eat it. If they're not in the feeding mode, they're probably going to eat it. I don't know how many people in the wintertime down here in the Ozarks catch 7-pound largemouth, 6-pound largemouth, 5-pound largemouth when they're crappie fishing, right? Because they're bobber fishing, they're slip float fishing with a little jig out over a brush pile. See, we got a lot of brush piles down by us, and that's another big, I guess you want to call it, sneaky deal. Let that thing sit over a brush pile. That brush pile is in 15 foot, and it comes up to, let's say the tip of that brush pile is in 12, right there about 11 foot. I'm going to leave that fly just sit there right at the 12 foot, I'm not going to get hung up, right? I'm going to let it just sit there over that brush pile. Twitch it a little bit, let it sit there. Twitch it a little bit, let it sit there. That big bass that was sitting there probably saw every jig for the past hour, 2 hours during that day of, let's say, a tournament. You throw that float fly, let it sit over there. 9 times out of 10, it's going to come out, even look at it, and by the time it looks at it, it's such a little, I call it a little piece of candy. Oh, a little piece of candy. Oh.
Yeah.
I'm going to eat it.
Just to piggyback on that, because that's a really good point, is I stumbled onto something about 3 years ago. We have some of the best swim baiters in the world in our region. Alex Niapis, he's a part of the St. Croix team. I put him on the team actually. He's an absolute animal. Probably if not top three in the world, in my opinion. He's just a stud when it comes to. So we fished a tournament. We fished against each other all the time. He was up against a pylon throwing a swim bait because he knew 5 or 6 giant fish lived there. He had found them in practice. He watched the fish follow him back. So he's willing to throw at one pylon, one cast for 3.5, 4 hours in one day of a tournament for 1 or 2 bites to win the tournament. So I watched him fish. I fished all the pylons next to him with the float and fly. I had my limit in 15 minutes on those pylons, and he had no fish in the boat, kept throwing. Finally, 4 hours later, he left that pylon. I know him well, and I know why he was there, and I went over to that pylon when he left, and he knows this whole story. I caught an 8, a 6, and a 5 with that fly in 3 consecutive casts after he had been there for 4 hours throwing a giant swim bait across it. So he got those fish fired up. They were on his bait the whole time, and they were willing to go after that little fly because it was a do-nothing bait. And then the very next tournament, he was on a separate lake, different body of water. He was fishing a jig and a big swim bait on a suspended pylon that wasn't above water, that was about 15 foot from the top. He threw it over and over and over and over. I went over there with the fly and caught a 6.5 pound spot first cast after he had been there for 3 hours. So what that tells you is they're willing to eat that fly when they're not willing to eat a lot of other baits. And it's a great follow-up deal if you are throwing big baits, or you do know where some fish live. You follow up with that bait. That's a great way to catch those big fish.
So if this gets, I'm sure this is going to get posted, right? And I know I'm going to say something, and I know some people are going to be very mad at me, and I'm just going to block their number or block it like this. All these spam callers that have been calling me nonstop lately, right? So I know a few people that literally will take the hooks off the glide bait and to get it suspended with lead wire, like their hooks on it, so it still does everything, and throw around these brush piles and let them come out, and then they'll go back in there with it wouldn't have to be a float and fly technique, but with a different technique that sits there and suspends, and they have a better hookup ratio and they don't follow. Yeah, right. So they pull them out. They know they're in there. They'll swing back around when that fish, because usually in a brush pile, a 6-pound fish will come out. Yeah, he's probably going to go back in there if he didn't eat it, right? So, and then you get probably let's just say 1 to 6 fish on 6 fish following your glide bait. Maybe one of them is going to try to eat it, right? So it's more of a drawing power. It's like you can do, like he was saying, like a 1-2 punch, right? Throw that big steak on it, with or without hooks, draw them out, see if it's there, go back in there with a little piece of candy. Everybody's going to take a piece of candy, even when they're not hungry. You're going to eat a piece of candy. It just sits there, right? Your favorite snack, just sitting right in front of your face. You're not going to eat it. You kidding me? You're going to, right? That's what that big fish is doing. It could have been, pressure changes. I mean, it's not just winter. A lot of people throw it in the wintertime because it's one of those good baits that when they're just shut down, let's just say it's a shut down bait. When those fish are inactive and shut down for whatever reason,
it's when it excels, for sure.
When it excels, you can catch it all year long in different situations. But let me tell you, if they're eating a spook, I'm not throwing a fucking float and fly. Excuse my language.
Me either.
I'm not. If they're eating a glide bait, I'm not throwing a float and fly.
There's a time and a place for everything.
Yeah. So, but when you get a lot of followers, a lot of nippers, right? There's something wrong. Like they're coming up, blowing up on your spook, or coming up and just blowing it out of the water, just getting it out of the way, and you follow up with a different bait, and they're still not eating it right, or you're missing a lot, right? There's just something funky because, you know, nowadays, man, it seems like every time I go fishing or whatever, you're on some fish and then you get up on a school of fish or some other fish that are just in a funk. They just eat it the wrong way. I don't know if it's the pressure, a lot of tournaments, because at Lake of the Ozarks, there's probably 8 tournaments every weekend for the entire year, right? There's probably average of 200 boats, fishing boats every day, every Saturday and Sunday plus fishing. And probably the 97 different tournaments going on the lake. It seems like there's a tournament every. It's just crazy. There's a 60 boat tournament coming out of this resort. There's a 80 boat tournament coming out of this ramp. There's 100 MLF down here. Bass Opens is down here with 200. It's just crazy. So like when these fish get really pressured, what I'm trying to say is when they get really pressured, man, the floating fly shines, right? It's just something that people don't even think about because they don't know, or they just don't really want to spend the time to do it. And I'm telling you, it's one of those baits that if you put your time into it and you understand it and you understand where it really shines and really when it really like is good, man, there's nothing I don't think can beat it. And like he was saying, you really don't lose fish on it because they eat it right in the top of the mouth, right? It's always right in the dead of their mouth. Even with the large mouth, I had it in the side of the, it's in the positions of the mouth that you won't lose the fish, right? It's where you want to hook them. And you only lose fish if it goes into a brush pile, like I'm saying, or it goes around a piece of structure. You got to understand that too, right? So when you get hooked up on it, you got to understand where that structure is. Sometimes you can horse them just a little bit, but you don't want to horse them too much. So I use like 6 to 8 pound test when they're getting I call it a good look at it. When it's really pressured, I'll even go up to 10 if I'm around a lot of brush piles. I just have a little bit thicker line. When I'm a lot of structure, right? I'll go up on my line just a little bit. Yes, they're still getting a good look at it, but I rather have more of an opportunity of getting it out of that structure and getting that fish in than maybe losing a bite or two.
That's always the name of the game with line weight, right? You're always balancing that.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, and you got to be real careful when you go up in that line size that you're not too aggressive, because you got to remember you got a little tiny wire hook that flexes and you lose fish that way pulling hooks too.
Yeah, so when I go up with line weight, I go down in. So if I was using like 6, like my rod size, I'll go like a little bit lighter in the rod, like action wise, right? Every medium light, everybody's medium light is different. This rod company's medium light, that's like a medium to me, man. That's not a medium light. Or that medium light is, man, that's like a noodle ultra light.
Hey, man, even among the same company, just a different model, medium light will be a little different.
Yeah, so like there's
different materials,
you gotta definitely like do some homework on your line, on the rods and stuff like that. And then just like jerkbait fishing, I'm a jerkbait fanatic, right? Like I'm a jerkbait fool, but I throw different rods for mega bass jerkbaits than I do for Strike King. Because of the hook, right? Everybody hates mega bass hooks because they bend out. No, sorry, Charlie, you're using the wrong line size and rod. I'm just being honest with you, man. I'm just. It's not the bait, because it's not the bait. I don't take offense to it. Some people might take offense, but Japan's got it going on, people. They know about bass fishing world, right? JDM market knows what they're doing, right? These little tiny little BFS deals, they've been having it for 6-7 years before it even came to the United States. So these little tiny little creature baits, these little tiny little dice game, they were rolling dice over in Japan many years before dice came over here on scope. So if you ever look at you go into the JDM market of rods, like Megabass P5. So they're like, let's just say a P5 cliffhanger, right? That's their they're small BFS, hair jig, little like stuff like that. That's my best mega bass jerkbait rod. 6 foot, just a super noodle rod. That's what I throw in the wintertime on my mega bass jerkbaits. Because the load up, it just loads up perfectly, and it's strong enough that it can handle those 4 or 6 pound fish. Because in the winter, in the dead of wintertime, I'm talking like 45 and below, they fight hard, but they're not fighting hard as in when the water temperature is 50 and plus. They don't have that much drive unless you're smallmouth or big spot fishing. I'm just talking about the largemouth. When it's cold, it's kind of like they'll
get
do a
soft.
couple of head shakes, and then you're just rolling in a wet towel. Sometimes that's it's just dead weight until they see the boat, and then they freak out. But that's when like the rod is really with your line size. If you're bending out your hooks on these flies, your line size or your rod is wrong.
Yeah.
So
Or
I
you
would
need to
say,
loosen your drag.
yeah, or loosen your drag, yeah,
Loosen your
or
drag, right.
like old school back reeling. A lot of people don't do that no more. Me trout fishing, I click that thing in the old school back reel and let it go, and then I'll reel on it, and then once they start, digging, I'll just let it back, or let the drag go or back reel, whatever you want to do. It's just like thumbing your bait casters when it gets right to the boat, and then they dog you hit you thumb your
thumb
bait
over.
caster, and it's like the same concept, right? It's the same concept, just a different thing. So like, moral of the story on this is, if you don't know it, go find a school of crappie, learn the bite, go trout fishing, learn your patience, learn the bite, and get this perfect balance of the slip bobber. That's going to be the key, is having it balanced to your fly. And there was a point of time that Spro flat fly was out of stock for, I don't know, felt like months.
I
And I
bought them
think,
all.
yeah, probably.
I did. I bought about $900 worth of flies during that period.
there's
And that's not a joke.
so get a fish tank, get something, and you want that. I mean, even get it kind of like, you want that fly to be horizontal, right? You don't want that to be vertical. You don't want it on a 45-degree. This presentation is when that that fly is sitting perfectly dead horizontal,
Yeah.
like a suspended jerkbait.
Yeah, just get yourself the 3/4 inch, or it's either 3/4 inch or large. It's literally labeled two different ways on this
Yeah.
bobber, this Pro Series, and then get an 1/8 ounce fly, and get
Yep.
yourself on 6-pound fluoro. Try
Yep.
to run 15-pound braid to fluoro. It'll save your life a lot because that line floats. But if you do those three things, play with it with that, you already know you're balanced, because that's 8 years of knowledge telling you that you are balanced with that setup.
Yeah.
And you're going to have success if you have the right setup. And for me, what's funny is about a lot of the stuff you said, I can tell the regions are a little different, because ours is so dominant here in our spotted bass fisheries that I always actually play a joke on my guys that I teach that in the boat. I'll drive down the middle of the lake and I'll tell them to cover their eyes, and when they feel like point, and we'll pull over right there and we'll catch fish. And that's how dominant that technique is in our lakes. I can pull over blind like that on a bank that it has no structure, nothing. As long as you have that setup and that style, for us, that bobber goes down just about every 3 casts.
Yeah, see, ours is more like, we do have spots down here, but there's no, our big, you catch a big spot, it's 4 pounds, right? That's our mondo.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some 5-pounders around. Smallies too, 4 to 5 pound is like big smallies to us in most of our lakes here.
Hey, I'll burst your guys' bubble a little bit here too. Here's an inside fact that nobody knows about California and all those. You guys all see Bullard's Bar and the giant spotted bass coming out of Bullard's Bar that are world records, 9.5 to 12.5 pound spotted bass. 80% of those bass were caught on the floating fly.
No kidding.
I don't care if you saw a crankbait in their mouth. I don't care if you heard it was a crankbait. It was a floating fly.
I heard Matt Long caught a couple of them too, right? On the float.
Yep. Yeah, Cody Cody Meyer is a float and fly master. He'll never
Oh man.
you'll never see it on TV, but he is a float and fly master, that boy.
Yeah, I'm sure
And
when this gets posted, there's gonna be a couple Ozark guys gonna be like, "What are you doing, man?" So
oh
like,
yeah,
but you know,
yeah.
it's
The
one of those
problem is you
things
can
that
tell somebody till you're blue in the face. If they don't go out and do it and get the
yeah,
confidence, it's never going to be somebody you're competing against because you've got to sell out on it and you got to learn it.
yeah.
There is a
I
steep
mean,
learning curve to this, right? Because you
there
have to
is,
have it balanced. And you
and
guys
like what,
pretty much laid it out for everyone. It's just like what you need to do and how it's going to be balanced right out of the box.
yeah. I
And
mean,
people,
Yep.
if you're interested in this and you're listening to this podcast, these guys just laid it out for you.
yeah. Like so, just like recap of this whole thing: 7.6 to 7.10, medium light, 6 to 8 pound test, right? Fluorocarbon to 15, pound braid leader. You can throw. I throw straight fluoro too. Man, just keep it simple, stupid. But in that aspect, you got it that 3/4, like he said, that he laid it out of many years of balance on that certain fly. Because if you use a different brand, you're gonna have to rebalance. You're gonna have to it's not gonna be, it's not that bobber size, and that bobber is not gonna balance correctly. I mean, and the floating fly or the Spro flat fry is pretty. That's where you want to be at anyway. It sits
That
right.
it's killer, dude.
Yeah, it sits
I've
right.
had yeah. Go
It's
ahead.
everything that you need. You don't have to go find this, you right? It's not like, Tommy down the road hand tied these jigs for me and I got to go find Tommy in Lake of the Ozarks, right? That's
Right.
all the info I got. It's not like one of those sneaky little techniques. But you got to get that Pro Series fill or bobber. You got to get the Pro Series. Spend the money. Just do it.
Yeah,
And then,
and make sure on that. There's one other key on that because there's two different kinds. One's weighted and one has no weight.
oh yeah,
You do
right.
not
No
need
weight.
weight. On this
Yeah.
one, no weight.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I did forget about that. You want the one with no weight, right? No weight,
Yep.
that 1/8 ounce fly, 6 pound test, your 7.6, 7.8, 7.7, 7.10, medium light is where you want to be. It's just an oversized crappie rig, basically all it is.
Yeah, it really is, man. When you
It's
start
just an
thinking about it.
oversized crappie technique. I'm sure there's some crappie rods out there that can probably handle it just as much. You don't need to spend $300, $400 on a rod and $400 on a reel.
Yeah.
You just want a
Yeah.
good quality. I wouldn't even say you don't even have to worry about the sensitivity. You don't want something like
No,
super.
at all.
You don't have to
At
worry
all.
about something super expensive because of the sensitivity, right? You got into your carbon fiber rods and all this stuff. It's not your bite is your eyes. You're
It's a
not really
visual
feeling
thing.
that.
It's not, you're not feeling it. You're seeing
Yeah,
it.
You
yeah,
don't feel anything because you're 90 degrees. You're 90 degrees to a bobber straight down. All you're doing is seeing the bobber. You never feel a bite.
yeah. It's never you don't feel anything. It's all by sight, so you don't have to have the most sensitive rod to do it. Your decent rods. I like lighter stuff, so I do tend to go
Yeah.
to the more
You
expensive stuff because I don't want a
you
freaking
have to
broomstick in my head.
yeah,
I
you
don't want
have to
to.
have the lighter rods for sure.
Yeah,
That's it doesn't matter about the sensitivity, but that light rod,
yeah,
all that's doing is allowing you to land the fish and not
Later
flex your
fish.
hook and not overpower a little bait. That's all
yeah,
that's for.
yeah, yep. Now and it's loading up on it and the casting of it. The load up and because you're throwing that little tiny thing. Your bobber's carrying the weight right to cast. So
Yep.
you do want
Yep.
the extra tip so it loads up and then you can cast it out there with less but you're not casting 100 yards out there. It's not like you're reeling. I don't know. I would say short casting. What do you say, Matt?
Yeah. You
More than
want to be able to
30
see your bobber.
yards? Yeah, you don't want to barely see
Yeah.
your bobber. You want to actually physically see your bobber. So, I mean, I would, if you want to learn the technique, you get a fast, Matt's got 9 years of experience. I don't have that many years, and I don't throw it as much as I should. right? Because I got into glide bait fishing, and that's a whole different, weasel down. Because now, ever since you get a 7-pounder in the Ozark regions on a glide bait, you want to throw it at every time, like every dock, right? Just go crappie
Yeah.
fishing.
Well, I got six float and fly rod setups on my boat every tournament, starting probably next week because our temps just got down into 55-degree water.
Mhm.
And I will tell you, for 2.5 months straight, I do not touch another bait, another rod other than float and fly. I just manipulate colors, depth, and and sometimes float sizes depending on how windy it is. That's about it for me. And
Yeah.
I've in my area, out of the last 5 years straight, in my weekend tournaments, you're talking the 50 to 70 boat field, Saturday, weekend warrior bass fishing tournaments, not the pro series stuff and everything else, just those alone. 80% of those tournaments, I'm in the top 5 with just a fly, and it's been that way. And everybody knows what I'm catching it on. Everybody knows what I'm doing, but still nobody picks it up because they don't have the confidence.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That's the biggest
that's the
thing.
big.
I know some people that would just go out for a couple hours and try it, and they're like, I ain't with this. I'm gonna go catch it on a spinnerbait. I'm gonna live and die by the black and blue jig. I'm gonna live and die by the
Yeah.
Cinco. Like you got to like man, just go
You got to
dumb it.
commit to it,
You
man.
got to
You
commit to
really
it,
got
Yeah.
to
dumb
commit
down,
to it.
go trout fishing, crappie fishing. I mean, really, just go crappie fishing with the same setup that you would bass fishing. Go pull up to a school of 100, 200 crappie. Understand the fly. Understand the bob, the go under, the lift. Certain those 3 different bites, right? You got the bob, you got the fully under, and then you got the lift. It comes up and just sit vertical or horizontal on the water, on top of the water. Those are your 3 bites. Set the hook, or not really set the hook. Reel into them. There's a fish on it. It's not like you're bobber fishing with bluegill and they got like a 8-inch, like a 4-inch worm on it, and they're picking at the little pieces of worm, and finally you get hooked, right? You probably, yeah, you every once in a while you catch a bluegill on it, but just go crappie fishing with it first. If you never done it today, you want to get the setup, go to your lake that there's a bunch of crappie at, pull up to it, learn the bite, learn the confidence, get into it, and then mosey your way into the bass fishing. Wintertime, and it's a sneaky little springtime deal when those females are in a funk, shorten down your depth. There's a front just came in, the males are still up there, the females are just doing their little cruise, and they'll pull back out, sitting just suspended, don't want to eat anything, don't care what's in front of their face. You throw that little piece of candy in front of their face, 9 times out of 10 they're gonna react to it at least once. You're gonna have one opportunity. And that's your time to shine. Boom, get it done, and yeah. So,
Guys, I think
man,
we have covered this pretty good for tonight, man. Is there anything that we've left out? I mean, I feel like we've hit quite a few things. I know I've learned quite a bit.
I mean, I think
Yeah,
it
I
can
don't.
go from 2 foot to 20 foot. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it's it's
it's
it's definitely a scenario thing. You got to just read what you want to do. But if instead of getting that detailed and trying to figure out your depths, I really honestly believe if you set your thing anywhere between 10 and 15 foot and just go to the
absolutely,
lake with the right setup, that's how you
absolutely
gain confidence, and that's how you find them. Fish structure, fish man-made stuff, fish some bridge pylons. You will
bluff
have some
walls.
immediate success. Yep, bluff walls, and
Yeah.
if you go down one of those and you spend an hour and a half, 2 hours doing it, you're going to get some bites. And once you see the bite, it's pretty addicting. It's my favorite way to fish. I'm known as a sight fisherman. I've always been known as a bed fisherman here in California. I chase big ones. I got 60 fish over 10 pounds under my belt, and
Man.
that's what I used to love. That's what I used to love. But I have absolutely fell in love with float and fly. I just kills me waiting for cold weather because I love the whole feel of the float and fly.
Yeah, it definitely is addicting, man. When you put all your time into it, and you get the rewards, right? You're getting the feedback. You're getting those rewards, and just like any other type of application, whatever lure technique, when you don't get the rewards, you don't get the feedback, and you stop doing it.
Yeah.
So you have to get the feedback. You have to put your time in. You got to give it effort. And one day, 1 hour is not enough time to throw your hat in. Right, you got to give it some time to you understand it, because it's not, you just have to understand it and understand, like, in some cases I don't have the California go down, pick your bait, pick your bank, and we're gonna go
Yeah.
catch 20,
Yeah.
right? Because it's all largemouth down by us. So like, but if you find the structure, you find the brush pile, you find the bluff wall, and you do ever the steps that we have talked about, and kind of the setups, you're gonna get rewarded, and you might catch the biggest fish of your lifetime on a 2-inch do nothing fly. It's not an 8-inch glide bait. You think you catch a 10-pounder on it, you got to throw an 8-inch glide bait, or the biggest baits to catch the biggest fish. Not really, because I know a lot of people in a lot of different size ranges always eats a piece of candy but can't finish a whole steak.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your time, Kurt, and I think if they had any other questions, they can PM me, or PM Matt, or
Yeah, absolutely. I love helping people
Yeah.
through the process. So
Okay, so guys, let's wrap it up here now, and we'll give
Okay.
you a chance to thank your sponsors, and you can tell people where they can contact you and what's the best way to get a hold of you. Matt, you want to start?
Yeah, so Instagram is probably my best. I mean, I'm Matt Fraizer on Facebook, but Instagram is Fraizer Luck Fishing. That's where my
Uh-oh.
Oh, we lose Matt.
We did for a second. Why don't you go ahead, Tyler, and if Matt bounces back on, we'll let him finish up.
Okay, yeah. So I'm Tyler Boyet. You find me on. I just
there
have
you go.
Facebook.
Now-
I'm kind of
now
young,
can
but
you
I'm
hear me?
old school. I don't have.
Yeah. Hang on a second, Tyler.
Oh, he's
go
back?
ahead, Matt.
Okay.
Yeah, we got him
Oh,
back.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
back.
Matt.
So,
We missed you there for a second.
Okay, all I was saying was basically the only person I really want to thank, just because we're talking about float and fly, is probably St. Croix. Those guys down there allowed me in the last several years to really help design a lot of their rod lines, and a lot of it's been California inspired. And we got a really, really, really good float and fly rod. It's that they make it in the Legend tournament, and they make it in the Victory series. Victory is a little bit cheaper, still has a 15-year warranty, but it's that 710 medium light extra fast. And if you buy that rod, I had a lot of influence on that rod, and I can tell you right now, it's dialed for that technique.
And it's made in the USA.
Yes, it is.
We like that very much. That's awesome. Go ahead, Tyler. You want to go ahead and finish it up?
Yeah. No, real quick. I mean, basically, you can find me on Facebook. You can PM me. I don't have Instagram or none of that. I'm young, but I'm old school. I hate the technology type of stuff. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm a big lose guy. I use a lot of lose reels and stuff like that. You can, I'm sure they have a rod. Like I said, my favorite rod is they're the St. Croix, like he said, right? And then the Dobbins is kind of old school, the 762, 7'6", medium light. Champion is kind of what I throw, and then the Lose 2500 or 3000 spinning reel. And I'm a big Stegar guy. I'm not sponsored by them by any means. I'm a big Stegar guy. I live and die by the brand, and I'm really tight to the Tatsu, especially with all the cover that I fish around the Ozarks, right? We have a lot of man-made structure docks. We have a lot of brush piles. We have a lot of angle iron. We have a lot of stuff like that, and I've never been failed with Tatsu. But yeah, you got any questions about the stuff? Man, I don't think there's a better fly than the Spro flat fly, right? That's kind of the name of the game right there. And that the Pro Series bobber that we talked about.
Yeah, Spro, if you're hearing this, we got a couple sponsors over here because we, I've moved so much of that Spro fly in the last 8 years. It's probably, couldn't even tell you the numbers, but I get several a week messages on the setup of a floating fly and how to rig it. and I can
Yeah.
guarantee you that we put them through the ringer on that one. I'm probably
man,
part of
I
the
don't-
problem selling them out.
Yeah, that's
I
why. Yeah,
guarantee
no,
you
I mean,
guys have sold some Spro stuff off this podcast right here.
yeah, I mean, I wish, there was a more sneaky person that ties the perfect fly, so like we can like get our. I don't. It's all about the horizontal game with that technique, and they have nailed it 100% on the head, and the hook is great. So yeah.
Yep.
I bet Tackle Warehouse is gonna be selling out later tonight. you know, um, all the West Coast, the hookup tackle, all that stuff. I bet they're gonna be getting some orders because people are gonna be trying to find it, and it's really, I mean, it is expensive, but it's not. You know, so oh, I lost it. Yeah, here we go.
Well, I think I'm going to wrap it up here. I appreciate both you
Yeah.
guys being on. We lost. Tyler is back. We'll put him back on for a second. Tyler, we're just closing it out, man. I appreciate
I
you.
wish I need AT&T to sponsor me so they can get this scam. If there's a scam, call, app, I need to get that because no lie, I get 40 spam calls a day. Like it's probably what we were in this for an hour and 20 minutes. I probably got, I don't know, probably 20 of them since an hour.
Geez, man.
It's unbelievable. It's crazy. But no, man, all I got to say is wrapping this up. I know it went on for a while. Go get confidence in it. 3,000 size reel, medium light rod. Go have fun. Go find a group of crappie. Go get confidence in it. That's all I can tell you. Like, I mean, if you're in an area not like Matt, where you can go to any bank and go catch, 6 to 8 pounders on whatever cash you want to go and catch 63 pounders, crappie is probably the best thing you got going on with you to understanding the bite and getting confidence in it real quick. Because every lake around the Midwest has crappie in it, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same setup, same what I would go crappie. It's just an oversized crappie gear, basically what it is. And man, I don't know how many, and if you have crappie fish, you guys are crappie fishing a lot in the wintertime, I guarantee you caught a big bass or two over 4 pounds on a little jig, and you're like, well, I wonder if they were going after a crappie and they just ate my jig instead. No.
They're eating small stuff, just like the crappie are.
Yeah, they're eating the little piece of candy is what I call that. What I call it down here is a little piece of candy. When it gets really, really tough, I'm gonna go through the piece of candy and see what I can do.
Oh, I like it. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on, and I want to thank all our listeners. Obviously, these guys are like more than willing to put out the juice for you guys. So if you have any questions, go ahead and give them a follow. Check them out on Facebook. There's not a lot of guys in the fishing industry that are this open, so take advantage of the knowledge that we have.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna get in trouble. I'm gonna hear it. I'm gonna hear it, man. So it's not a big thing down here in the Ozark region, except for a few, right? It's not like a big like West Coast deal, but you know what? Everybody's got YouTube. Everybody's heard about it. Hey, who am I to? If I let the juice out and they start catching fish on it,
hey man, if you can help one person catch a fish, that's a good feeling. I feel.
Yeah, like. I want people to succeed, right? It's just one of those things that they can come in at any local league, any higher league, and go smash them one day and feel good about it.
You got Oliver Nye, Big Bass Streams. You got Ish Monroe. You got Cody Meyer, all these guys out here. So Ish Monroe and Oliver Nye, I put on my boat, both of those guys. And still to this day, they will not go on the lake without a floating fly in this time of year. And I've ruined them on it. So they are 100% believers.
Yeah.
I love it.
Hey, wait, real quick, Kurt, are you going to be at the Tri-State show?
I don't think I'll be working it this year.
Okay.
I might be up there. I might be up there. Are you coming back up to sell some tungsten?
Yeah. We'll be up there at the Tri-State show. Not the Indiana show.
Throw that out there. Name of the company.
Okay. Come on. Well, it had nothing to do with, it had nothing to do with.
It doesn't matter, man. This is all about.
So Pro Tungsten, the owner and myself, the owner is like a dad to me. we're local to the Midwest, and we have everything from 1/16 all the way up to 2 ounces. We have some tungsten crappie jigs that are coming to the market, hopefully by the show. You know, we got the scoping tungsten jigs. You know, that's a new craze. And we're just a small mom and pops deal. That we have basically I don't know. We've been in the game for 11 years now, and it's hard. We're not the. We just showed up one day and we just started selling tungsten, and then like next, you know, trying to ruin the market, and then they leave, and 2 years later, and there's not a company no
You
more.
guys are long hauling it.
Yeah, we got
Yeah.
we
Sounds like I need a care package over here.
Yeah, what you need? Yeah. Send the address. I mean, we got 97% pure tungsten. You know, it's diamond polished. It's powder coated. We got our sizes on the weights now, because that was a big thing that everybody wanted. So we can do that now. It's, you know, the highest quality weights, and we try to keep it, you know, as the lowest cost, you know, really that we can. Right? We're not really big into consumer market, as in like Facebook selling and stuff like that. Our big market is, you know, wholesale, like dealers, but will always take care. We have a website, protungsten.com. You know, we always takes care of the fishermen, right? And we try to price it as much as compatible as can be. And if you do shop at big box stores and you see our prices, you can see the difference, right? So, but I mean, I wish I can sell, you know, the tungsten. We had to go up a little bit, you know, with the times, right?
Yeah.
It's
Things
one
are
of
more
those things.
expensive now.
So, but no, I mean, it's a mom and pop shop, right? It takes care of, you know, we donate back to the fishing communities, right? We do sponsorships for like local high schools, and, you know, just the stuff to try to keep, you know, the community around us happy as best as we can, and, you know, donate to the local like fundraisers and stuff like that. So yeah, Pro Tungsten lose. Um,
And you guys are
yeah.
going to be at what show are you going to be at in
So
Cincinnati?
we're gonna be at the Let's Go Fishing Show in Collinsville, Illinois, the first weekend of January. Right, if you're anywhere around Collinsville, Illinois, and then the next weekend after that is the Tri-State Show out in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, at a hotel. Man, I tell you what, nothing against the Collinsville show, the Lawrenceburg show. Man, it is downtown Lawrenceburg, right?
It's
You're
a
right
cool
on the
show.
Ohio River, and if you're coming from out of town, you can. It's inside the hotel. It's in the conference center of the hotel. You go to hotel. There's a restaurant in there. There's everything you need is inside that hotel. You don't have to leave it. You go to your hotel room. You go to elevator. You hit the lower level, and you're in the 200 booth. Um, uh, whatever fishing show, and they got hunting there too. And it's really that show is really full of Ray Rigby does that show. He's the promoter, man. He's really about mom and pop shop
Yeah, it
tackle.
really is.
He's really into that stuff, and he's got some new. I mean, there's gonna be my buddy from St. Louis now at Lake of the Ozarks, called Bait Cake Customs. They have some really big fans, or really big showing on Facebook right now. He'll be there. I'll have some A-rigs, seller bait A-rigs, and seller bait spinner baits. Man, if you want some just mom and pop shop, if you like to support them, nothing against the big stores, because we all need the big stores, right? The big stores is what handles, you know, keeps the fishing to keep the ball rolling, right, in the fishing industry. They sponsor bigger events. They aren't needed, right? But the mom and pop shops are, you know, needed also. And Ray Rigby is just probably, out of 200 booths, probably, I would say, what do you think, Kurt? 80 to 90 of them is local mom and pop type of
I would say
shops.
180 of them are.
I would say, yeah. I mean,
I would say 90% of the booths at his shows are the smaller, more interesting companies, bait companies. Just if you're looking for stuff that's a little different and interesting, dude, those are the shows to go to.
Those are the most fun shows out there when you get to see all the custom stuff.
Yeah, like to be honest with you, I don't want to go to the Strike King booth. I love Strike King and I use a ton of their products, but you know what? I want to go see something different.
Fishermen always want to find what nobody else has.
Right.
Oh yeah.
The little sneaky stuff. And there is some sneaky stuff that I only buy and okay, like the stupid tube is only a Indiana type of way to rig a tube, right? I bring it down to the Lake Ozarks and I took a top 20 in the Bassmaster Opens down here on the stupid tube, right? It's just one of those things that you cannot, this is the craziest thing, and it'll blow Kurt's mind, right? You cannot go into any tackle store in Missouri, around of all the big lakes, and find a stupid tube head, jig head.
See, that's kind of crazy to me because they're all over here, right?
Yeah, I mean, they sell tubes. There's not one tackle store that carries stupid tube heads. That's you cannot go to a local dealer anywhere driving in the whole state of Missouri out of all the lakes and find a stupid tube head. I buy 100 of them when I go every show when I go to Indiana. Cause
stock up on them.
It's a thing down there, right? So like that's the cool thing about Ray shows, and it's just like it's that kind of stuff. And man, Ray don't make a lot of money. He's not in it for the money. He's it's a real nice show, and man, he tries to put on the best shows possible. And if you're in the area of was it Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky? I guess that's the tri-state there. I mean, it's a really nice show. I think it's $7. I think
cheap. Parking's free.
Good
and food. The food's cheap there too.
Yeah,
it's literally probably the best show. If you're in this area, in the tri-state area, it's the best show to hit.
Yeah, and it's like there's a parking garage, like 3 stories, so it's covered parking, right? Because it's either gonna snow, be cold, or it might be nice. Who knows, right?
Oh, that one year it snowed, right? we had
I think one year it was like ice and stuff like that. But it's a really nice facility. It's really he sets it up pretty good. And man, if you're within, I mean, we come from St. Louis, right? So if you're within 4 or 5 hours, I would say go there. It's worth it.
Yeah,
definitely worth it. So,
well, guys, I don't want to take up any more of your time. I want to thank you guys very much for being on. I want to thank everyone for listening. And if you get anything out of this, please share this episode with your friends. And we will be taking the month of December off. So we will see everybody in the new year. Thanks again, guys.
See you guys. I appreciate it, Kurt.
And we